Welcome. Today's webinar on TDU and our role in the Teamsters. My name is John Gacy. I'm a shop steward and a member of the almighty Local 509 in Charleston, South Carolina. And I'm a proud member of TDU. A lot of people think of TDU as a group that does education or fights for contracts or supports candidates for union office. And it's true, we do all those things, but really, we are a movement of Teamsters working to build worker power from the bottom up by informing and mobilizing members and by teaching ourselves and other workers to be better stewards, organizers, and fighters. If you're not already a member of TDU, I invite you to join. Yearly dues are just $50, and there's no better investment in Teamster power. So let's get started with a quick poll about who's here. You can vote in the poll in the Zoom. How have you been involved in TDU? Attended TDU workshops or webinars? Attended TDU convention? UPS contract campaign? Vote No movement? Local union contract campaign? Local union reform? Pension movement? Supported TDU-backed candidates for IBT leadership? We've got people here who have been involved in TDU through all different generations and campaigns. I personally got involved with TDU a few years ago. I was tired of being taken advantage of by the company, and I was looking for help. In TDU, I found education and a network that inspired me to become a shop steward, an organizer, and a leader in my building. That is what TDU is about, developing rank and file leaders who can unite workers against employers. We call this approach rank and file power, and it has defined TDU for almost 50 years. Today, we'll talk a little bit about where we've been with a focus on the role of rank and file members and TDU in making Teamster history and changing our union and labor movement for the better. And we'll talk about our role in TDU and rank and file power in the new Teamsters. At the end, we'll have a question and answer session. Now I want to introduce our panel. First, Kim Path left his job at Preston Trucking in 1979 to become a TDU national organizer, and he served in his position until 2021. He doesn't just know Teamster history, he is Teamster history. Willie Ford is the principal officer of Charlotte Local 71 and an international union trustee on the O'Brien-Zuckerman Teamster United Slate. He has served on the TDU steering committee. Dan Campbell is a retired Teamster who has served as a union representative in several locals. He is also a longtime member of the TDU steering committee. And last but not least, moderating our panel is the man, not a myth, and one day will be a legend. His name is Paul Prescott, and he's a TDU staff organizer. Take it away, Paul.
All right. Thanks so much, John, and thanks everyone for getting on this webinar today. So first, I think no better person to start with than Ken Path. I'll start with you. Can you tell us, why was TDU formed? What was happening on the job and in the union that made members start to organize as a rank and file?
Okay, good morning. At least it's morning here on the left coast. I'm honored to be asked to speak to a few hundred TDU hellraisers who build rank and file power. TDU was born in 1976, which is 48 years ago, the most durable and successful rank and file movement in U.S. labor history. I'm proud to be part of it. I hope you are too. That success has not been by accident. To know more about history, you can visit the history section on the TDU website for materials and a number of interesting videos. TDU was begun on very weak footing, thin. Some young activists like me, well, I was young, and older vets of Teamster battles, a few from the Wildcat strikes of 1970. We had the support of exactly 0 local officers in the entire Teamsters. Why was it formed? Concessions, sellouts. Remember, 76, that was 1 year after James R. Hoffa disappeared. Frank Fitzsimmons was at the top. Hoffa was not coming back. He was dead. And people were upset in the freight industry. Number one, UPS, Car Hall, others, especially the national units. We didn't have much strength, but we had principles. Teamster democracy, building from the bottom up. We didn't have many rights. Some ways that helped us. We had to build from the bottom. TDU issued a TDU rank and file Bill of Rights as sort of where we stand. We learned how to do things. We were good learners. You got to be a good learner to be an organizer. We learned how to change bylaws, for example. And we, like in my local 407 Cleveland, Ohio, we won elected stewards. We started contract campaigns. We kind of invented the concept, but we didn't have anyone on the bargaining committee. We didn't even know what the hell was going on. But we got out leaflets, petitions, made demands on contracts, and started to catch some imagination of workers. We kept at it. We kept at it. We persisted. If we went the wrong direction, we corrected. We learned. By the mid-1980s, some Teamsters were taking notice. National contracts were rejected by a majority in freight, in car haul, and in UPS, all in the mid-1980s. So we started to have a little cred. The contracts were then imposed using the 2/3 rule, all of them. Presser put forward a concessionary rider, and it was rejected by a big margin. It's kind of TDU's first victory. Members in these big national units were demanding TDU take action to win the right to vote. But me and others were going, how the hell are we going to do that? You know, we started reaching out to allies. We found allies in unusual places, like something called the President's Commission on Organized Crime. Our campaign for the right to vote was headlined, no mob control, no government control, Teamsters want the right to vote. It was a very wordy button. We had a giant petition delivered to the 1986 Teamsters Convention on we demand the right to vote. Part of a tactic, we ran Sam Theotis, the president of Cleveland Local 407, for president of the Teamsters against Jackie Presser. Wonder what the vote was. It was 1,700 and some, I've lost track of that number, to 24. It was 99%. Following the vote at the convention in Vegas, Presser announced that he was now conducting the funeral of TDU. But we didn't die. Actually, in a way, it helped us because he was hated. If you think James R. Hoffa, if you think if you think Hoffa Jr. was the worst president ever, you're wrong. Presser was hated, but got 99% of the vote. Long story short, our plan, our outreach, our persistence, and truth be told, some good luck, we won the right to vote, March 1989. By the early 90s, we had won most of our Bill of Rights. The right to elect officers was #1, international officers, I mean. The right to elect delegates, majority rule on contracts, though it had a loophole, we found out. The right to vote on supplements to national contracts separately, bringing down officer salaries with a cap in the Constitution. We had achieved most of our Bill of Rights. And actually, we set that aside and moved on to a deeper meaning of democracy. That's where we went in the 90s and beyond, rank and file power. I'm going to wrap up and pass this on to someone who was one of those 24 delegates who voted against Jackie Presser.
All right, thanks, Ken. So as you mentioned, 89 TDU winning the right to vote. So in 1991, members elect Ron Carey as general president. So for Dan Campbell, our next speaker, what did this upset win mean for TDU? What did it mean for the old guard? And how did the employers and rank and file react?
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the call and welcome to everybody who's here. I'm up in the middle of nowhere in northern Michigan at a cabin with internet access. And Ken's right, it was tough, 24 people, and you didn't just vote in a booth secretly. They called you to the microphone. There were spotlights on you, and you had to say your name, your local union, and how you were voting. So it was incredibly intimidating, and that was on purpose. Anyway, like Ken said, in 91, our candidate that we were in coalition with, Ron Carey, won, and it was huge. It was revolutionary. Suddenly the Teamsters went from the worst reputation in the union movement to the best. And Carey took steps right away against corruption. He took symbolic steps, or that weren't symbolic. He sold, these luxury jets and cars, and cut his salary, and eliminated the multiple salaries that people would collect in the union, at least at the national level. And of course, the message was to the rank and file that corruption was on notice in the union. And I think it's a great message. He meant it, though. He wasn't just fooling around. The old guard folks, first of all, after Carey's win, they all dove under their desks for cover because they thought, I don't know what they thought, that they were going to be removed instantly or something. That wasn't possible. So when they started coming out of their desks, a civil war in the union ensued. And there was a conservative backlash. And they went after Carey in a couple of different ways. And one very obvious way was that in 1994, UPS unilaterally raised the weight limit on packages from 70 to 150. Carey called a safety strike. And like 70% of the unions scabbed on that strike. Fortunately, enough strategic and powerful reform unions did strike, and it was very successful at stopping that move and getting good language in the contract, which remains today. The other thing they did is there was a needed dues increase to cover the strike fund and strike activity, and the old guard organized, even though it was in the best interest of the union, they didn't care. They wanted to hurt Carey, and they organized to defeat that. Well, 1997 comes around. It's the UPS contract, and a real rank and file oriented campaign was done, and there were some prominent TDU folks involved in that, where local unions, sat on their hand and weren't participatory in that. TDU members filled the vacuum and came in there. There was strike bulletins, and there was literature, and there was activity everywhere. And the strike was the precursor of what we just saw in the last successful UPS campaign. Very much rank and file driven. Carey definitely wasn't a TDU member, but he opened up the union in a way that we took full advantage of it. We even printed or sold jackets and T-shirts that said, winning at the top, building at the bottom to win at the top. And so it was a vice grip strategy. Many reformers won local union office, and with the help of the administration at the top, folks at the bottom, good things started happening. So I'll pass it on from there.
All right, thanks, Dan. So all this TDU activity kind of culminates in the '97 UPS strike. So shortly after that strike, Ron Carey was removed from office because of a fundraising scheme some of his campaign staff engaged in the '96 Teamster election. Carey was later found innocent in court, but unfortunately by this time the damage was already done. So after Carey, Jimmy Hoffa Jr. wins a rerun election and takes office in 1999. And I think it's fair to say him winning was a big relief for employers. So I'm going to kick it to Willie Ford now. What did this mean now, this new Hoffa era? What did this mean for the rank and file in general, and what did it mean for TDU?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being on the call. Thank you, Paul, for that question. Hoffa election was a huge setback. He was a well-known person because of his father. It was very demoralizing. So TDU had basically two major goals in mind. The first goal, keeping democracy alive after Hoffa took office. We made sure that rank and files had members they could choose during the election that would have leaders with Teamster power. Such candidates as Tom Leadham in 2005 and then Sandy Pope in 2011. And TDU prevented Hoffa from rubber stamping the convention. It was very fortunate and for members to have delegates at the convention. Fortunately, I was there in 2011 supporting Sandy Pope, and then again in 2016 supporting Fred Zuckerman. The second goal of TDU was to fight against contract givebacks and concessions that Hoffa gave during his administration. A huge concession took place in 2009 among the freight members. They lost some of their benefits and wages were decreased as well. And then again in 2013, we have organized a Vote No campaign at UPS and at Freight. Again in 2018, we worked with O'Brien and Zuckerman to oppose the 22 fours and concessionary cuts at UPS. And we gave them a choice by voting for another slate, of course, and that would be the Oz and the Teamsters United. We fought Hoffa in every aspect. We also fought his proposed cut to the Central State Pension Fund, and we launched a movement to pass the Butch-Lewis Act and to save 400,000 pension funds. During the Hoffa years, TDU served as an organizing hub for the members against concessions and continue to make the union a more democratic place. This only happens with your support of the rank and file members. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Willie. And so at the end there, you mentioned, TDU still leading campaigns against concessions, against givebacks and benefit cuts. So this kind of sets the stage for the end of the Hoffa era and the beginning of the O'Brien Zuckerman Teamsters United coalition. So I'm going to throw it back to Ken. Can you describe, how did this coalition happen? What was the role of TDU in forming this coalition?
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thanks to Willie, you're an inspiration. The 2016 IBT election was a turning point for IBT leadership. The pension movement, the Vote No movement in freight, car haul, and especially UPS 2013, every national group of Teamsters voted against Hoffa, the big national units in the 2016 election. It was clear his days were numbered. Airline workers, rail workers, 93% of officials endorsed Hoffa, and yet 49% voted for Fred Zuckerman and Teamsters United slate. TDU's ideas had become kind of common sense in the big units, UPS, freight, and so on. And at that point, it was an unstable situation for the IBT and for TDU. Sean O'Brien and some other militant former Hoffa supporters saw the same thing. It was time for change. Fred Zuckerman and Sean O'Brien formed a team, a coalition. It was then up to TDU to decide what to do. TDU has a long democratic process for big decisions like who to back in a thing like this. Meetings of the TDU steering committee, meetings with members around the country, appointing a subcommittee of TDU leaders and members to meet with Fred and Sean a few times. There was finally, it came to a head at the 2019 TDU convention where Sean O'Brien spoke, took questions and answers from the floor. There was a vote and it was overwhelming to join the Teamsters United slate. TDU has to operate in a united fashion. Willie Ford, who just spoke, joined the slate among others. Sean O'Brien, Fred Zuckerman, and the Teamsters United slate swept the election. And that made history in 2021. Coalitions, by the way, I want to say this again, are nothing new for TDU. In the TDU Constitution, it says we're for coalition with other forces to build united rank and file power. We did that with Ron Carey. We do it all the time. We do it locally. Coalitions help build rank and file power by giving us more opportunities to do our big mission, members coming up from below. We support people for IBT office, but we're not a campaign committee. We're not a group that issues report cards on national leaders. Our number one mission is more leaders coming up from below in the Teamsters, in the whole labor movement. We need thousands of new leaders who can lead strikes, who can link together, who can organize, including organize Amazon and build a powerful labor movement. So that's what we're about. That's what we were doing in this period. And I think and I hope we'll hear more about this in the next part.
Thanks, Ken. So that's kind of takes us on our warp speed TDU history tour, and that kind of takes us to today. So as you mentioned, Ken, 2021, TDU helps win new leadership and a new direction by electing the O'Brien-Zuckerman Teamsters United slate. And, you know, if you're just a campaign or electoral campaign, after the election, you close down. I mean, think about our political elections. They ask for your vote. After the election, you don't hear from them. But TDU, as Ken mentioned, is about building a movement in the Teamsters, about building leaders at all levels of the union and charting a different question. So the question we're going to look at now is, you know, what is the role of TDU in the Teamsters now, in this new Teamsters? So I'm going to call on some more TDU members to talk about this. So first to introduce our new panel is Lindsay Hammond, who's a shop steward from Wisconsin, Local 344. We have Greg Gallegos, a shop steward from Local 455 in Denver, Colorado. Mike Gillespie, a business agent from Local 135 in Indiana. And Matt Mortensen, who's a rail teamster from the BMWED in Missouri. So I'll start with you, Lindsay. Can you just kind of describe, you know, how did you get involved in TDU and why are you still involved in TDU?
Hey all, yeah, so I am a UPS driver, shop steward out of Local 344 in Wisconsin. So I've been involved with TDU for several years. The webinars have been a huge source of information for me. The guides online, that is, you know, those are all really great. But for me, the biggest thing is just getting that connection with other Teamsters. It's been invaluable for me to learn different strategies for contract enforcement, organizing members, and you know, just finding different ways to take on the boss on the shop floor. I've learned so much from, you know, the webinars, but the real value is just getting to, you know, meet other people face to face, going to the workshops, going to TDU meetings, and especially going to the fall convention. I actually recently went to Chicago for one of our regional meetings, where I learned directly some fresh knowledge to organize members and campaign methods. This year, actually, we started something different and something new, the TDU Central Region Stewards Network. There's over, I think, 100 full-time and part-time stewards and general members. We've got just across the board, just different years of knowledge, different areas, not just UPS, but we do focus on the central supplement, central region for UPS. We have weekly conference calls, we do Zoom meetings monthly, and we have a really active WhatsApp where we talk not only about contract enforcement, but we also share different ideas and strategies on what to do, taking on the boss, different topics like how to form a safety committee, be successful at that. In June, actually, I was a part of this. We coordinated across a bunch of different locals heat safety action. So obviously June is pretty bad in a lot of areas for the heat. And we wanted to get the word out there with the new language, the new heat safety language in the contract. My building actually held a really successful parking lot meeting. So we couldn't have done that without the coordinated efforts with other Teamsters. So I can't express enough how much it was important for me to be connected with other folks in the central region. And I'm really, really looking forward to getting to see all those folks in the fall at the TDU convention. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. And so as you mentioned, you know, education and networking for contract enforcement is a very important part of TDU's work. But we also play a critical role in campaigns for strong contracts. So Greg, for example, you know, you're a member of the TDU Stewards Network, but you got involved in TDU during the national UPS contract campaign last year. You know, we've talked about, we have leadership now that, you know, is willing to take on the company more, run actual contract campaigns, but the real force behind this is the members. So, you know, to support that contract campaign, TDU held webinars attended by more than 20,000 UPS Teamsters over the course of that year. We produced materials, we had people at the gates getting the information out in the buildings. So Greg, you know, why was this kind of rank and file on the ground activity so important in your local?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Welcome, brothers and sisters. I'm Greg Gallegos out of 455. For the first time at the beginning of this 2023 contract campaign at my local, there was minimal presence of any contract campaign that was going to go on. In the past, contract campaigns just meant having a proposal meeting and a ratification vote. Members wanted to change the status quo and make an impact for this contract. We used TDU webinars and materials to kickstart the campaign by ourselves this time. We passed out flyers. We had parking lot meetings, educated coworkers. This involvement prompted members to start getting engaged, had many discussions on what a strong contract actually looked like. We also had 2 in-person UPS Teamster TDU meetings to help get this organized. Once this energized movement started, our local leadership also jumped on board. And in July, our local held a massive practice picket event for the first time in my 27-year career at the company. TDU's belief in educating and getting members involved, along with TDU support and member engagement from the rank and file, helped fuel a successful contract campaign for the first time, I believe. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Greg. And to shift gears a little bit, I think probably a lot of UPS members on this call have by now heard about Local 135 in Indianapolis. It's one of the biggest Teamsters locals in the country, and one of the most, locals with the most diverse membership. So members in trucking, food distribution, construction, UPS, manufacturing, healthcare, and even some other industries. So with new TDU leadership, 135 has been making a name for themselves by winning contract campaigns, orchestrating strikes, conducting organizing drives, and just generally kicking ass for their members. And so it hasn't always been that way. So I'm going to bring on Mike Gillespie, who's the current business agent for Local 135, and he's been a business agent for 2 decades. So before the new leadership, the local leadership hated TDU and kind of taught you to feel the same way. Can you say why was that? Why did leadership think this way about TDU?
Yeah, thank you, Paul, for the introduction. Welcome everybody to the seminar. To answer Paul's question is our executive board at that time, up until the period we took over, TDU was continually talked about as just doing nothing but coming in and destroying the local itself. They would destroy the leadership. And that's just the mindset that I was indoctrinated into when I started there until later on in my career, where I just was befuddled as to this is not how we represent members. This is not how we negotiate contracts. It's not collective begging. It's demand bargaining, is the way I always felt through my career.
And so, in 2022, you and others got fed up and decided to change things. So you joined the Members First slate with other TDU members led by Dustin Roach, the current 135 president. So can you tell us about that process? Why did you run, and how did you all pull off that victory?
Being that I already worked for the local, there was some changes that were going on internally. Because of the changes, I opposed them greatly, and not because it was a threat to my job. I wanted to see change. So when I talked to Dustin one-on-one, I didn't even realize the TDU plan to take over office. It was just the right thing to do, and we put every effort forward because our message was always members first. It's not from the top down like I had previously been involved in. It was from the bottom up. We listen to our members, we educate our members, and we make them stronger. And I didn't realize this until others talked to me. I've been doing this for 20 years, developing members and leaders. I just didn't know how to the next level should come.
And, winning an election is kind of only the first step. And in many ways, the work really only is just beginning after you win. So, you all have stayed active with TDU. You've been hosting annual contract campaign summits with TDU every spring. So can you talk about how have you taken this like UPS contract campaign model and taking it into your white paper shops that you represent?
Absolutely. The UPS model was the prime example of how to keep get your members activated so they have they're in the fight with you. They're not relying on the business agents or the leadership. They're in the fight with you, and you let them be very much a part of it. And that's the way it should be. It's members driven. I took that model and I've negotiated, I don't know how many contracts since then, and I just show them the vision. I use a whiteboard. I love the whiteboard the most, but I show them the vision from beginning to end, and how we say when the company doesn't meet our demands, they are striking themselves. It's not us taking them on strike. So the TDU plan of internal contract campaigns has been very beneficial. And I don't care if it's a membership like UPS or a membership of 10 members that I represent in the barn, we use the same model and we attack the companies the same way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. And we're, beginning to see that strategy bearing fruit in different industries. So, Mike was talking about running for office, but we have rail Teamsters who still don't have the right to vote for their leadership. So TDU members and rail Teamsters have launched an effort to change that. So we're going to switch to Matt Mortensen, or also known as Morty, who is a rail Teamster in the BMW ED, and he's also a member of the TDU steering committee. So first, I think there might be many Teamsters who don't know much about our rail division. So Morty, can you start by talking a little bit about the BMW ED?
Yeah, what's up, Paul? There are roughly 30,000 BMW members. BMW stands for Brotherhood of Maintenance Away Employees Division. We maintain the tracks, bridges, and buildings. We are the only Teamsters that don't have the right to vote for union officers who bargain and enforce our contract. Right now, the only way that we can voice our opinion is we vote delegates at, we call them our systems. They're like your locals. So we vote for a delegate to go there. The delegate speaks for the whole local. So they could be voting for 129 people. Some have 300 some odd people. Not every member gets a vote. Because of that, they only cater to the delegates only. So they keep a lot of the membership in the dark. Leadership doesn't feel accountable in any way to the membership at all. So for kind of an example, our contract is up here in 5 months. Unlike UPS, you guys have a contract campaign that you do. We are doing no contract campaign. There's been no survey. We have no clue what they're discussing with the railroads at all. I work for BNSF Railroad, and Warren Buffett owns BNSF Railroad, and I believe that we should be united, taking the fight directly to billionaires like him who profit off our backs.
So, what are you all doing right now to try and change things and make things better in rail?
We're causing a lot of problems, I'll tell you that. But we're finding, the right to win votes for officers at the system level and the national level. We are doing this both, because we want the membership to be involved, and we want the membership to stand up to the railroads to win strong contracts. We've been building a network of BMW leaders to build the right to vote. Our network spans, because the railroads across the whole country. So it spans from, I've been coordinated with people from Mississippi, Chicago, Texas, Minot, North Dakota. People want to stand up and they want to build a stronger union. We've got 100 members involved, attending webinars, signing petitions, and getting groups together to take pictures with signs. And the movement's been growing really, really fast thanks to TDU.
Thanks, Morty. And finally, could you just say more, what has TDU meant for you and other rail Teamsters in this moment?
Oh, man, TDU means a lot to me. And the reason why is we joined the Teamsters back in 2005, and we've never felt like Teamsters. So a lot of us have been demoralized. We were sold that, rail, road, and air would all work together if we joined the Teamsters. And we've never seen that happen. And there's never been talks about us. It's just kind of like they've been collecting our dues. And, that's about it. That's all they've been doing for us. But joining TDU, it makes me believe that TDU is going to be the movement that brings the rail, the road, and the air together to fight against corporate greed. So, I'm excited. The TDU convention's coming up this year. A lot of guys that I've been talking to, I haven't been able to meet in person. I'm going to be able to shake their hand in person and sit down and, talk shop with them there in Chicago, and also build up relationships with other guys through UPS and other Teamster members. And it's really important to me, man. That networking has been amazing, and that's all thanks to TDU.
Thanks, Morty, and thanks to all the other speakers on the panel. I want to remind listeners and watchers that we are going to be doing a Q&A section at the end. So please submit any questions in the Q&A box that you should see at the bottom of your screen, and we're going to have the panelists return to handle those questions. But for now, I'm going to kick it back to John Gacy.
Thank you, Paul. Wow, this is just a sample of things that TDU does to build union power from the bottom up. It all comes together at the TDU convention, where more than 400 Teamsters meet every year to share strategies. Last year, I attended the TDU convention, and I attended because I was at the point where I was beyond exhausted with how I was being treated, and even more importantly, how my Teamster siblings were being treated. I didn't just want change, we desperately needed change. The convention was nothing short of excellent. Imagine being around people just like you for 3 days, folks that are fired up, wanting change, and currently taking action. I've received a plethora of valuable information. I gained important and strong connections through networking. Man, when I left Chicago, I felt like I had a battery pack on my back. The experience empowered me in more ways than I could ever have foreseen. And in this moment, that's exactly what I want for you, because I feel it's a good possibility that if you're on this call right now, you are needing change. The convention has more than 24 workshops. It's a special place where members, stewards, local leaders, and international union leaders meet to make their plans together. This year's convention is November 1st through 3rd in Chicago. And if you join TDU for the first time, you will get a $50 off your TDU convention registration. If you join for 3 years at $100, you will receive $100 off your convention registration. So I encourage everyone to join TDU and come to the convention. It takes all of us to build a strong union.